Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live on this Saturday in the afternoon. I'm joined today by a esteemed writer of horror fiction, Stoker Award winner, Sarah Reed. How are you, Sarah?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Lauren.
It's exciting to have you here. It's one of those things that I have probably too many writers on the show, but it's where I'm most comfortable. And I also think that writers, unfortunately, don't get the due that sometimes filmmakers or musicians or actors get. So until I'm told by the people in my community to stop it, it's not going to stop. And even then, it's just going to slow down. It's not going to stop. I'm still going to be I'm going to still care about what I care about.
Yeah, well, you should.
So Boneweaver's Orchard
Uh-huh.
wins the award for best first novel, or I guess superior achievement in a first novel, which I always question because superior achievement it could be jumping jacks, right? I mean, it was the best first novel of the year. That's what it was. Let's keep things simple here. Let's not word it up just to do it. And that's something that I actually find in your work is that while your prose definitely flows, you definitely value an economy of words, and I think that modernly that's appreciated.
Yeah, I like to I write lean, and from the beginning, which I think is a different way from what I hear. For most people's writing process, I don't write a big rough draft that I then cut into shape. I write a very sparse first draft, and then I paint a layer of detail, a layer of characterization, another layer of detail, until I feel like it's got the balance I want, and then I stop.
Do you really? Do you stop? You just run out of time.
Oh, well, yeah, there's a confession, right? Eventually, somebody else usually stops me. Otherwise, yes, yeah. I could do that forever. Yeah.
Absolutely. But last year was also a busy year for you besides Boneweaver, because you also had a short story collection come out, which was also nominated. And that was called Out of Water.
Yes. Yep. My debut collection came out, I think in November, and my novel came out in February. So there was some space between them, but it was a busy year.
No, I mean, as slow as the publishing industry can move, that's a busy year.
Yes.
That's a tremendously busy year. Yeah. Karina Bissett says hello.
Oh, hi, Karina. I love Karina.
And DJ Donnelly asks if I'm ever going to get Stephen King. The answer to that is no, sir. But I haven't even queried, to be completely honest.
Hey, yeah, you never know. Never know.
No, this is true. So I start off every show with a very similar question: is how did you get bit by the horror bug? What was the inciting incident?
Well, I mean, like I think a lot of people probably say, I was born with the horror bug. Always liked the spooky parts of stories. I had haunted house picture books that my grandmother would read to me as a kid. My favorite one was a glow-in-the-dark haunted house, where you could read the book in the light and it was just a normal book about a house, and then you turn off the lights and there's like ghosts in the windows and some hidden illuminated text, and it's a totally different story. Then I adored that. So yeah, from the very, very beginning. And I mean, I wasn't always reading just horror so much as appreciating the horror in all genres. Like my favorite book is The Secret Garden. Huge inspiration for me and for Boneweaver. And it's gothic, yes, but nobody ever calls it horror. And there's definitely moments in it that just cast a spell on me. The thought of a little girl, far from anywhere she identifies as home, wandering the halls of an old mansion at night, searching for the sound of somebody crying is terrifying. I loved it.
That could be a 17th century castle, or it could be the middle of the night at Crystal Lake. Yeah. I agree. And you saw my definition of horror at the beginning of the show. Mm-hmm. It's one of those genres that does invade just about everywhere if you're actually looking for it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have a lecture I give sometimes called Horror is Everywhere. And that's what it's about, is how it's, people say they don't like horror. And it's like, well,
Dig a
you
little
like
deeper. They always
you
admit
like
to
a
it
little bit
later.
of horror.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is unlike most other genres, it's built around the emotional response in the reader, viewer, listener, and that's very different than most genres. Romance is the closest, but romance is so much more narrow in its scope.
Right.
And no offense to the romance fans out there, but it's at some point this very finite amount of emotions that a romance novel to be successful has to hit.
Right.
Horror doesn't really have to hit anything.
Right.
Straub's Coco is an example of a novel that for years people refused to call horror. It's only been in the last 10 years or so that people finally just relinquished and said, okay, it's horror. We get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that about my work a lot, that it's not horror. I hear it regularly. It drives me a little bit more crazy every time.
Well, I think of your work as more along the lines of like what Del Toro has done in film. It's like taking Gothic structure and applying it, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but to a popular form of fiction. It's not niche. It doesn't. Bone Weaver never feels niche when you're reading it. It feels like general fiction, but it hits all those emotional notes that you would want good Gothic or horror fiction to hit.
Yeah, that's my goal.
Okay, well, if that makes sense to you. Every once in a while, someone looks at me and goes, did you read the book I wrote? Or so horror. How old were you when you started with that book that now I need to search down and buy about the haunted house?
Oh gosh, maybe like there were a couple of them that were similar, and one of them is still around. A later version of it is still around. We actually got it through my library not that long ago, and I like freaked out.
I'm sure that was a moment.
I mean, I still have my old copy, of course, but seeing it in the wild was exciting. The first one, I couldn't have been more than 4. And then later versions of it, through elementary school a bit. And, until I was more reading independently on my own anyway. And then I was picking up, other, Gothic things, and eventually into Goosebumps, and R.L. Stein's Fear Street stuff. And when that got to be it was not scary enough. I could relate to the characters as kids, but I couldn't feel, I couldn't engage on the level I wanted. So I was in about 5th grade. I think I was about 10 years old when I started reading adult horror. And I started with Dean Koontz and tried some Stephen King, but it was probably Anne Rice where I was like, that's it. I'm far gone. And I needed, I think, that historical and Gothic, and that's what I think I was looking for. And I read everything that she wrote by the time I was 11, which I shouldn't have probably been doing, but nobody cared what I was saying. So I read
Books
it all.
Books have that weird diplomatic immunity with parents. It's like they never let you watch a film that portrayed this stuff, or even most parents listen to music that uses some of the words. But a moment it's printed in a book and bound, it's like, well, at least they're reading.
Yeah, and I was very unsupervised, and my mom knew I liked spooky, scary things, and she didn't feel like she needed to stop me from that. But the downside of that was, when she saw Poltergeist and The Exorcist, she would see them on TV broadcast. So when we would go to Blockbuster Video and I would say, Mom, I want this movie because it looked really scary, she'd be like, sure, fine. So I think I could not have been much older than 7 or 8 when I saw The Exorcist. But I saw the VHS version, not the made for TV version. So she had no idea what I was watching and getting myself into, and it was not age appropriate, but I loved it.
So do you hear that they're going to make another attempt at The Exorcist, right?
I did
Morgan
not.
Creek. Yeah.
I'm out of the loop on movies because I've got young kids. So.
No, I mean, look, Blatty's a favorite of mine, and I think if you look at that franchise, it's pretty clear like the 2 films he had anything to do with are the ones that are great, and the rest of them not so much.
Yeah.
So now that he's gone, maybe it's time to just move on from The Exorcist.
Yeah, yeah. There's why I don't get all the remakes. I don't understand. There's so much new good stuff. Why?
Well, there's 80 years worth of horror fiction that's not been adapted that would be still relevant. You don't even have to go back pre-Lovecraft. You can just start with Lovecraft and work forward. And I mean, even the explosions in the late 60s have not been adapted properly. We get Levin's Rosemary's Baby, and we call it a day. It's a joke.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't even seen a lot of the classic horror movies, and yeah, it's even then. I feel like there's so many books that I'm reading that I wish would be movies that might not happen. But although I feel like with Netflix and Hulu and all those places, they're starting to pick up more new stuff. Like Mexican Gothic has just been picked up by Hulu, and that's my new favorite book in the whole world. So
it's amazing, isn't it?
I love that book, and I keep telling people, like, I'm stubborn. I change my favorite book once a decade. Literally, I think I've had like 3, and this is my new favorite book. So I was very excited to see that it's going to be adapted. In that nervous way of feeling protective of the material, even though does not in any way belong to me, other than it's So. Yeah,
I was just shocked that reputation, the reputation that book has, does not match that book. That book is a lot more hardcore than people are anticipating it to be.
Oh yeah, and I mean, to see it on the bestseller list, I think it's giving people an illusion that it's somehow mainstream.
No. And I can't. We both want to say something that we can't say right now, so we better move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you want to get to that page and have the same reaction we did.
Yeah.
Karina has a question for you. Okay. Is your process the same in short fiction as it is in your novel development? Do you ever find yourself with do you ever find that your concepts for short fiction can be expanded, or does the form usually fully realized?
It's a similar process for short fiction, although in short fiction I'm more likely to start with a single image or a single character, or even just a line, and build my draft from that. Whereas for books, that's not quite enough to start with. I need to brew a little more on where I'm going with it before I do it. I feel like I can be more risky and experimental in short fiction because it's a small investment as far as time, energy, and if I end up wasting my time on it, it's not I haven't lost a year.
So it sounds like you're a mixture of a traditional outliner and a pantser.
I pants my short stories for sure, but for novels, I'm a pretty obsessive researcher and planner. So I handwrite everything, and I start off with a small blank book. That's my research book. And I will spend months with just that one, because I write a lot of historical. My novels so far are all historical. So there's a lot of just, background research that needs to be done for that setting. And so I will spend a lot of time on that and outlining and character development before I really start putting down the story. But that being said, I mean, the outline, I don't view it as, carved in stone. So it can and will change as I'm writing. If I see it going in a different direction, I'll follow it. And that happened in my most recent novel draft that I've just recently finished, where it took me a lot longer because I had to completely rewrite the ending because it wasn't going where I told you.
You see, that terrifies me. That absolutely terrifies me. I can't write either a short story or a novel without knowing the whole story beginning to end, right down to the breakdown of chapters, sometimes to how the passages are going to work. I can't do it. I have to. I spend every moment that I shower, drive, and often while I'm lying in bed, either at the very beginning or the very end of the day, is just working the text in my mind into shape. And if I don't, I will not sit down to write before I know. I won't do it because I hate the idea of exactly what you just said. Ending up wasting a year going in a direction that's just untenable.
Right. Yeah. And I'm tempted to do that a lot. For me, letting myself brew on it, I've found actually slows me down more because I can brew for a long time. And sometimes I just need to sit down and start writing it before I really know where it's going. Because I guess my brain just works more in that kind of prompted capacity. But I think that comes from, for a number of years, I was writing for a living. After I left my job in publishing when my youngest son was born, because he had a lot of health complications and I couldn't be working full time. So I went freelance completely. And when you're writing for your life, because I was our breadwinner and I lost my health insurance and my income, you don't get to brew, you don't get to think, you don't have time. You have to turn that in right now. So you write for your life. And eventually, I think you kind of can train the synapses in your brain to just get the work done, whether you're ready or not, which isn't always comfortable. I don't necessarily like that, as that process and that anxiety of output, but I think it helped doing that for a few years.
Well, it's definitely a skill set. It's one I don't have.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not, unless you're writing for your life, you don't need it really, right?
No.
Why rush?
So DJ Donnelly asks, do you have any advice or suggestions on where to start if someone wants to become an author of their own? If yes, what are they?
Well, I mean, sit down and tell your story. And one of the first things I do when I need a new crop of stories is I just take a tiny notebook and carry it around with me, and I just write down all the ideas that come to me. I mean, keep your mind open to those ideas as they come. It's easy to be distracted and think about anything else other than where your imaginings might take you. Play the game of what if always. So anytime you're thinking about anything, what if this, what if that, what if, something happened differently, and let your mind just do that and write it down as you go. And before long, you'll have plenty of story ideas, and then you just have to sit down and write them.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. Just start with something that we all have ideas pop into our heads, bizarre ideas. What if while grocery shopping, I walk away from my cart and I come back and I actually accidentally pick up someone else's groceries and I don't notice till I get home? There's a story, right?
Yeah.
And so we have these ideas all the time, but the other thing I'd suggest is you need some mean friends. Because you don't get better as a writer on the craft side by people telling you how wonderful your ideas or how much they can relate to your characters. Unfortunately, you only get better when they tear up your prose and your work and showcase that you did waste a couple hours. Go back and do again and get better. And it's even better if that person is mean about it, to be honest with you, because coddling you leaves that leeway of maybe that's just one person's opinion. No, the person goes, you did it wrong, get it right. It's going to help you a lot more. But it's a weird process. Yeah.
I've been a member of a number of critique groups. I have one now. Karina is in it. And we exchange critiques almost monthly. It's been a little slack lately for obvious reasons, but yeah, and we're not necessarily mean about it, but we're professional about it, and we hold each other to high standards, and nobody's afraid to say this did not work for me, and it's a very trusting relationship that you have with a critique partner, but it's a wonderful one too, and I really like that professional collaboration with my peers. It's very special to me.
Yeah. You don't want to be comfortable, but yet at the end of the day, you will be comfortable because you realize they're making you better.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very welcoming kind of hardship that you put each other through.
Kevin just wants to say hello to us.
Hello.
And Griffin asks, have you read any of the Del Abyss books? He's talking about the go ahead.
I don't think so.
Janine Cavallo's Del Abyss years were like 1991 to about 96. And someone's going to correct me in the chat by all means. It's where Kathy Koja and Brian Hodge's careers really, as far as novelists, start. An extremely creative line.
If they were ever in any Scholastic book orders, then almost definitely yes. But I don't have like a recollection of their influence.
It seems that there's a growing movement to recognize her contributions as an editor to getting us out of kind of the 80s mold of horror fiction, which tended to be, the prologue would always have the monster or ghost kill a random character introduced to set up the stakes. And then we told our main story, 3 chapters of the person going grocery shopping and going to church. It was very formulaic by the end of the 80s. And then they were just, they were cribbing off people like Kuntz and King, and that's what it was. And it was a business. And Abyss was kind of this line that just said, nope, the art comes first. And so definitely recommend going back to them. And I think Griffin would agree.
A lot of what I was reading in those years was I wanted real ghost stories. So I was reading nonfiction ghost books, ones that would have like, photographs of real ghosts on the cover and would talk about stories of actual hauntings. Like that was my big area during the early 90s. That was, some of the covers were so scary that, you had to put them face down so the ghosts couldn't see you.
So I'm a skeptic in all these things, and I always have been. I mean, I never believed in Santa Claus and never believed in the Easter Bunny as a kid. I like, really? No. I mean, just immediately. So like, as much as I'd love to be into cryptozoology or into ghost hunting or any of that, because it all sounds absolutely amazing to me. There's this thing in my brain that just won't let me do it. It's this, it's like someone took the tinfoil hat and put it inside my head.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
But do you believe in ghosts?
It's a complicated question because yes, Lauren, I do, because I've had my own experiences, but I am also a skeptic. So when someone tells me a ghost story, I don't believe it. So it's weird. Because my last house in Colorado was messed up, and I enjoyed ghost stories, but was a skeptic when we moved there. And my husband was like you, tinfoil hat inside the head. And by the time we moved out 6 years later, we were both like, and so yeah, it was. It's something that's, I kind of got to say I do, because even though when I'm sitting here in the sunshine, I could say no. When you're in the thick of it, you're like, okay, maybe yes. And, but then, at the same time, when I hear a story, I'm like, yeah, maybe.
I find myself on haunted tours, like probably at least once a year. Well, not this year. Well, maybe Life is a haunted tour this year, but
yeah, you don't need to go there for your horror.
And the guides always hate me, because a really common thing on the tour guides for these things, and now I don't do it anymore. I just walk with the crowd now, because I don't want to annoy people. But they always have like some ghost story about a room in a hotel or a house, and they'll always have something. Who's brave enough to walk up? And I'm already on it. I'm like, I'm there. I'll do it.
Oh yeah, no, and. Because I love going on ghost hunts and haunted tours and things like that. I mean, I go as a skeptic. I've done the Stanley one a number of times because I used to live very close to the Stanley, only about half hour away. And, there was one time we did the overnight Stanley Hotel one with the ghost hunters where weird stuff was happening. But only one time, and I've done it many times, and it was just that one time. And never again. The rest of the time it's just been, a bit of a lark, but I love doing it anyway. And I usually, get one of the haunted rooms when I stay there, and nothing's ever happened. Been a little disappointed, but overall, I mean, it's good fun either way.
Oh, listen, I'm jealous. There's no moral superiority here. I am jealous. I would love to believe this stuff. I'd love to go out there and get scared.
Yeah,
that would be amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's not scary to me though, which might be part of the problem. It's removed from myself, removed from my endocrine system. It's just an interest. Like, it makes me curious more than scared. So I'm taking notes for stories.
Oh, well, I couldn't ask for a better transition, because Philip asks, is that a field notes notebook you carry around with you?
Why, Philip, it is. Are you a pen person and paper person too? Because yes, I have. I don't subscribe to field notes anymore, but I used to, which means I have probably 50 of them just off camera. And yes, I carry a pocket notebook around with me and a pocket pen. And sometimes I'll use the bigger field notes as my research notebooks. They're good notebooks.
I can't write longhand. Just can't do it.
Yeah. I think better on paper, and I'm always on the go because I got 2 kids and 2 jobs, and so it's like I write when I can, and that's usually not at a computer.
Well, I think it's important, and again, that whole democracy of creation, right? It's better when we all are different about how we create. That's why when people talk about technique or a process, to me, it's almost irrelevant. Like, what works for you works for you.
Yeah, that, and I have an inherent mistrust of technology, and it's mutual. So it's good for me to have my original draft in hard form immediately. I tend to kill computers quickly.
My grandmother used to stop a wristwatch. If she wore them for a day, it would be dead.
I cannot wear a watch. I have one that's a mechanical self-winding watch, and I can wear that one because it has no batteries or no electric parts whatsoever. It's just a little gyroscope, and it'll work, but being mechanical and self-winding, it doesn't keep perfect time, and that causes other problems, so I just don't bother. I can't wear a watch.
Yeah, it's becoming less relevant to people anyway. And, we keep cell phones on us, so we get to irradiate ourselves every day. Between that and the Wi-Fi, I'm sure something's going on.
Well, probably. Good thing you got that tinfoil built in.
Whatever. It's gonna bake my brain like the baked potato it probably really is. So Karina asks, do you have any tips for self-care when it comes to writing, especially during the times we currently live in?
Yeah, this would definitely be a do as I say, not what I do sort of self-care. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're writing right now. You can, and some people are finding that they're writing more right now. For me, when my brain is washed out in anxiety chemicals, I can't write very effectively. I'm stuck right now. I've got a short story invite to an anthology that's due on the 1st of September, and I've written 2 paragraphs and I don't like them. And so I am having a hard time writing right now. And so the self-care that I have for that is that's okay. I am not one of the believers in write every day, because if that were the criteria, then I wouldn't be able to be a writer, because I have 2 jobs and 2 kids, and I'm in grad school, and I don't get to write every day. I don't even get to read for fun every day. And that's got to be okay. And so for self-care, I would just say, be kind to yourself. Don't put extra pressure on yourself. There is enough of that going around right now. So just relax. Let this time be a time to refill that creative well. Just sit and think, catch up on your movies, something like that. Just be for now.
I think that you need to know yourself really well, and that'll guide you to what's going to be the healthy thing to do. Because if you're not in a healthy place mentally or physically, you're not writing well.
Right.
That's just how it is. We're not Hemingway. We can't all be drunk every day, dying of liver. Our livers can't be failing, and we're producing brilliant work. That's just not real for us. So figure out what makes you healthy and follow that path.
Yeah, and I think so much of publishing these days has become achievement driven, and I think that is detrimental to anybody's creative process, right? It's why are I see my friends sometimes saying publish or perish, and I'm like, just spend your time with your story. There's no hurry. There really is no deadline that matters more than your health.
Yeah, there's only one deadline, and you can't control that one.
Exactly, and that is the last deadline, the real one.
Right. Philip mentions that you introduced the notebooks to him, and yes, he has a dozen.
You're that Philip. Sorry.
You're bringing peoples.
I know, Philip. Yes, Philip and I both got into field notes. I think at the Stanley. Yeah.
So all your people are going to subscribe to my channel, right? Just to be self-serving for a moment.
No,
that's
going
to happen.
Yeah, wherever that button is.
I'll never bother you for money. That's my promise.
I've been enjoying the videos.
Well, thank you. Griffin asks, can you both name one writer that isn't yourself that you wished wrote more often? And we can't name each other, I take it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Short circuit. That's the polite thing to do. It defeats the spirit of his question.
For me, that'd be Susanna Clark. Her new one is just about to release, I think. I have it through NetGalley, but I've been waiting because I want to hold it in my hands. But Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is one of my favorite books. I adore that book. And
I've never seen a book so supported by retail as that book in my life.
Yeah, and it's a weird book for them to have picked up.
Oh my God, Barnes and Noble put that consistently, either have it on the facing shelves or the tables for the last 6 years. It feels like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well,
I've never seen that kind of support for anything.
It's so good. I love it so much, and I'm so excited she has a new one, and I can't wait. And I wish that. Gosh, I don't even know when that one came out, but it was a long time ago.
And I've been 6 years or something. It's long.
More than that, even. I think.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I've been waiting for another Susanna Clark book for a long time. So very excited.
I can't give one answer to this. I'm sorry. So Scott Smith, simply because once a decade is not quite enough. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. And it's like he turns in a draft. It's like a cool $1 million and movie deal immediately. So I'm not saying he should write just to write, but if I was in his boat, And on the other side of the coin, Elizabeth Massey. Liz is just such an amazing storyteller that so often, unfortunately, gets overlooked, I feel like. Yeah. I feel like people forget that in the 90s, in the worst years to be a horror writer in the 90s, before after Dell, before Leisure, she was out there putting out just some amazing work. And I'm lucky enough to know her. She blurbed one of my books, but that has nothing to do with this. I reached out to her because she's like one of my absolute favorite writers and human beings. So, so Scott Smith and Elizabeth Massey. Yeah,
I'd add Rena Mason too. I really like her work. It's very it has that kind of classic feel to it, but in contemporary voice that I really like. But so I hope there's a new Rena Mason soon.
Yeah, and I know it's a matter of months already. But Danielle Trissani just can't come up with another quick enough for me right now.
Right?
Because the ancestor was just like. It's very rare for me to pick up a book and fall in love with the book during the process. Like a story, yep, I can be just grooving down the middle of the story, having a lot of fun. And usually it's just like, well, this is what I'm reading right now. But The Ancestor kind of took over my life for the couple days that I was reading it.
Oh, that's always a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this summer's been so good for books like that. That's happened to me with Tremblay's Survivor Song and Stephen Graham Jones' The Only Good Indians. My God, that book. And and Mexican Gothic with Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and now I'm reading Mallory by Josh Mallerman, and all of them have just completely pulled me in. And maybe that's why I'm not getting very much done right now. I can't stop reading all the new horror.
So I think it's interesting though, because there's so much of a conversation right now about diversity in media. But here's the thing. The horror genre has always been better than most about it. And when you look at what's happening inside our genre, although they may not have the word horror on the spine, we're just going to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's risen all boats to hear from different voices.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So it's not as if like you straight 50-year-old white guys have been not getting the recognition now. They have when they put out great work. It's just that there's so many more voices out there supporting this community of creators, and readers are, I think, in the heyday on the literary side of the genre. Now, on the what I call, the fast food side of the horror genre, which I love as well.
Oh yeah,
I would say there we have some work to do. And there's nothing to be embarrassed if you work on that side of it. I believe me, at some points I like to work there. But the literary side is like exploding right now, and I just wish publishers would get behind the word horror and promote it as a genre, because it's unfair for this much good work to be coming out and it just kind of be, well, we're going to promote the hell out of the work, but we're not going to talk about where it comes from.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times, like with my books, I get told all the time, oh, it's Bone Weaver's Orchard's not horror, it's a historical thriller.
Did they read it?
Right? So I do think that that's happening pretty frequently. But yeah, I mean, we're in a golden age of horror right now, and a lot of it, I think, is because there's more diversity. I don't think there's enough. I think that there's still a lot of work to do. I made a resolution probably 3 or 4 years ago that I wasn't going to purchase, read, or review any anthology that had more than 50% just straight white guys in it. And you know what? I'm saving a lot of money every year on anthologies still. And some of the editors are friends of mine, and they come out with these books and my friends are in them. And I'm like, that's great. But you could have done a little bit better, because it's so much, in editors and curation. Because I've been an editor. I've edited 6 anthologies. I used to edit Pantheon magazine 4 times a year. And before that, I worked for a large publishing company as an editor. And if you're not seeking out voices that don't sound like the voice in your own head, then you're not doing your job. So I feel like there's still a lot of work to be done, especially in anthologies. I feel like publishers with novels are getting better. I think there's a lot more showing up there, but I don't think it's done yet.
I don't think it's done yet. We process it very differently in our heads, but I think at the end of the day, we're just talking vocabulary differences. Because I wouldn't put a quote on my reading, simply because I don't work that way. Right. I go to whoever is putting out that compelling story. I just don't care where that person's background from. Now, that background is what's going to make the story have that much more resonance.
Right.
But on my initial brush of what I purchased and choose to consume, I don't say, hey, this is a Mexican-American woman living in London, so I'm going to read her novel.
Right. I don't pick based on that. But when I'm curating an anthology, I want to make sure that there's, especially because the anthologies that I worked on, they're mythology themed. Right. And mythology so often gets westernized. And so if I'm going for myth, I don't want it to just be Western myths. And so and because I think readers will enjoy it too, I want that variety, and I want those different, it's a whole new kind of horror, right? To open our eyes to. It's exciting.
Absolutely.
How often have we wanted something fresh in horror? Well, there it is. It's been there all along. It's just, it's not making it into all of the anthologies.
Absolutely. I feel like the best product always wins out, and I think that we should trust the varied cultures to, once they get recognized that they exist, that's the real issue here.
Yeah.
Then they can play on the same playing field as everyone else, and then we're good to go, because naturally representation will happen, simply because the great in every society, as well as the fact that so much will be so new to the Western reader. I mean, you can't see it, but I'm a big in film currently. I'm a pretty much focused on 3 countries producing horror films, and none of them are America.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like India and Indonesia and Turkey are the 3 that right now are a complete hotspot for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm all for finding that work. I think that we have to be careful, because on the other side of it, I'm sure you as an editor were extremely careful about keeping the quality where it needed to be.
Yeah, and I think,
but I've also seen the other side of it. It was like, this is an anthology of all women writers, and you read through it and you say, wow, the first 2 stories were great and the last 2 stories were great, and I get what happened with the rest of them, unfortunately.
possibly. I mean, I feel like a lot of that too, at least with some of the editors, and when they're curating things, they have to remember too that what they relate to the most that's not what makes it the best.
No, absolutely.
So I feel like there's that I think sometimes people will read a story and not understand it and dismiss it because they don't understand it, when in fact that's their issue and not an issue with the story. So I found that a lot with when I was editing, and working even with my own first readers. I would sometimes read a story and they wouldn't have liked it and they couldn't relate to it, and I would read it and I'd be like, it's brilliant. They would have thumbs downed it and I print it. So it can be very subjective, but I think there is that open-mindedness that's needed when gauging quality. And as far as all female anthologies go, I mean, I think their primary purpose, for me anyway, is to introduce new voices, because so many of the big publishing houses will put out anthologies where there might only be 1 or 2 women in there. And if you're someone who's looking for new female voices in horror that you enjoy, it's hard to find them. Anthologies are a great way to find new voices, but if they're not printing women in them, then you're not going to find your new voices. But these all women anthologies, I can read those. I can be like, here's someone whose work I want to pursue. Here's someone whose work I want to pursue. And really, it's a menu, and not all of it will work for me. I don't expect it to with any anthology, but finding 1 or 2 new authors to me that I enjoy in an anthology is, I mean, it's served its purpose then for me. That's pure gold right there.
I think the important thing is that readers just need to be searching out new voices, period, however they decide to go about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't just pick up the same author every time. Read widely.
Yeah, read widely and be brave about it. If you think something sounds great, go for it.
Yep.
And that means you're going to read a lot of different people at this point, because with the variety of ways of publishing at this point, there's just no reason why you should feel locked into reading one type of voice.
Yeah,
there is enough out there.
There's anything you could want,
and probably some that you don't.
Yeah, plenty that you'll.
So we have a question here about your awards, and it does come from your friend Karina. Congratulations on all your well-deserved awards and best of inclusions. Does this make you feel as though there is more pressure, or does it just add to the career's momentum?
I don't know. There's a little bit more pressure, I think. There's some awkwardness to it too, because of course these awards are coming in on my debuts, and I haven't shed my imposter syndrome, and I don't know if I ever will. So like the This Is Horror Awards were just announced this week, and Bone Weaver won Novel of the Year. Not just debut, but Novel of the Year. And I'm like, really, guys? That's a reaction I can't help but have. And it feels like awkward more than anything, which, I mean, it's thrilling and exciting and wonderful, but yeah, it's just, I'm not used to it, that's for sure. And yeah, I don't know. There's some more pressure, yeah, but I also do see it as momentum. I mean, I'm sure as heck going to put that in my bio when I start sending out my new novel that I'll be sending out probably in the next 2 weeks here. So that's, it's not going to hurt as far as momentum goes. But like I was saying, a lot of publishing these days feels very achievement driven, and that's not really where I've ever come from with it. When I wrote Bone Weaver, I really honestly did not think anyone was ever going to read it but me. It was my first book that I'd written. I wasn't publishing short stories yet at the time I was writing it. My husband was working nights at the time, and I wanted to do Nanowrimo. And I sat in a chair at night once my kid was asleep with a rum and Coke and a pen and a notebook.
Your kid had a rum and Coke?
No, he didn't have one. I
had one. Well, no, I'm going to take you to task on something. No, this is going to be another area of disagreement between us. They love disagreement. Don't worry. So I think Nanowrimo is actually a really, really, outside of one aspect of it, I think it's a really bad thing. I think it enforces that idea of putting as many words on the page as possible. And for a lot of developing writers, they feel a sense of accomplishment, but that accomplishment tends to be very shallow.
And there are a lot of people who feel that way, and I can see where they're coming from, but I do disagree. All of my books have been written during NaNoWriMo. I go to some NaNoWriMo groups. I even host them at my library. And a lot of the people who I find are doing NaNoWriMo are doing it for the joy of writing. And again, it's that achievement-driven mentality. That's not what they're doing it for. They're doing it just to do it. Most of them, a lot of them are writing something completely silly just for fun. So many of them are writing Dungeons and Dragons scripts. Like, it's not something they're ever planning to publish. They're doing it for the joy of story so often. So, there are a lot of people too who then, hope to publish what they've written. But I feel like the NaNoWriMo community and its website and all the newsletters you get if you sign up, because there are a lot of those, too many of those, but they are all, the story doesn't stop here, edits. Bone Weaver, yes, I wrote it for NaNoWriMo, but I edited it for 4 years. So it's not, I don't think there is a philosophy of instant book behind it as much as that seems to be the reputation it has. And I don't think that's necessarily accurate. But I think it's a good way to get in the habit of writing. Daily word count matters, but 50,000 words is your goal. And that's not a long book. That's shorter than Bone Weaver, and Bone Weaver's a short book. So I don't think it's like a quantity thing either. But two, like I said, if you're a working writer, NaNoWriMo is a breeze. You're lucky if you only have to write that much every day.
Yeah, it's 1,500 words a day. Come on.
Yeah, it's
6 pages. It's 6 pages double spaced. Come on.
2 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, I think it has a bad reputation, but I think there are examples of that happening, but overall I've found that it hasn't quite earned that reputation.
So I've been involved in critique groups as well as writing groups, and I've seen evidence on both sides of this issue. I think it depends on personality of the person involved. Yeah. And that sounds almost like I'm copping out by saying that, but it really is what it is. I think that if you want to learn the craft, NaNoWriMo is probably not your best first move. If you want to learn a little bit of discipline of sitting down and writing, it probably is exactly what you need. I just always, the scale always to me is get it right. So, because if you're not going to be disciplined, I don't know how much discipline you're really going to get if you write for 1 month and then don't touch anything until, the next year. And that's always my big fear when people talk about it to me. Yeah.
They do run it 3 times a year now.
But no, we're not going there because that's not even a rabbit hole. That's the whole damn colony of rabbits.
Yeah. So.
Um, is there a possibility that you'll be editing more anthologies in the future? Pantheon rules.
Well, I miss Pantheon. The publisher of Pantheon went on hiatus beginning of last year, with the hope that we would come back this year in January, and that 2020 was not the year to
Relaunch anything.
no. And I don't know if Pantheon will come back. The publishers kind of moved on to other careers and things. So, but that doesn't mean I won't edit another anthology. In fact, the itch is, it's there. And every now and then the theme ideas creep up, and I thought, oh, I want a story by this person on this theme, and this person, and this person, and this person. And I start building an anthology in my head, and I'm like, I should probably write this down for later. I'm too busy right now. But yeah, I feel like I will at some point start approaching publishers with some pitches for anthologies. I think that'll definitely happen in the future. Hopefully within the next couple of years. We'll see how grad school is going.
Grad school and, the apocalypse. But so I wanted to just talk a little bit about Boneweaver textually.
Sure.
I'm noticing that a lot of the titles that we mention and a lot of the authors that we think are on the cutting edge, and we share a lot of them, even before we spoke, even on Twitter, we were kind of running into each other because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be a recurring theme that's very popular right now about the sins of the past in a family structure and hereditary sins. And certainly Boneweaver does appropriate that sort of structure at a point as well. Being careful here because I don't want to destroy your book. So what do you think it is that people are starting to look at like heritage as a cornerstone of horror? Because that's what it feels like for the last couple years.
Yeah. And it's also a classic Gothic element too.
Yeah.
So it might just be, it could be a generational thing. It could just be this kind of Gothic resurgence we're having right now, and I think, Del Toro is actually partly responsible for that. I know for me, The Orphanage is my favorite horror movie, and
it's in my top 25. No, it doesn't get talked about nearly enough. It doesn't. Yeah. Well, he produced that though. He didn't direct it.
Well, yeah. But it's. I feel like there is this sense of generational responsibility coming to a head right now. Maybe that's with the environment, with political unrest. There's all of this sense that the consequences of what we do are felt not just by us but by our grandchildren. And I think that that's very real now. It's not an abstract feeling at all. It's, affecting us every day. So maybe that is part of why that is creeping into our horror, because that is our horror right now.
Well, horror has always been the conduit for us to express the societal fears. Again, as we were saying before we went on the air, it's like Amityville Horror is about making a mortgage payment, right? Yeah. So it kind of makes sense that no matter where you fall on a specific issue, the place to explore it safely would be inside something like codified, like the horror genre provides.
Yeah, and I think it's an important coping mechanism and processing tool. I've always felt horror in media is healthy. It's good for us. It's good for our brains. It's a great way to develop the ability to and the capacity for understanding what we're going through and cope with it and develop our empathy for others and for situations as well.
And maybe even dive a little bit deeper than the sound bites on the news would give us.
Yeah.
I think the humanity of the stories is what ultimately is going to really inform how we really feel about them. But if all we're getting is 2-minute news stories and headlines, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
We're just in trouble.
Yeah, that character is what makes a story. That's one of the things I I bring up a lot in my writing classes at the library, or, it's, you can tell me what happened, but it doesn't matter unless you're telling me about who it happened to. And I think horror allows us to dig into that more than an indifferent headline would. Yeah, for sure.
And again, that's about how I define the genre, which is about emotions. It all makes sense, and it all goes back.
Yes.
So I ask you well, thank you. I can tell you where that came from. I was with the New Jersey Horror Writers Association, which was called Garden State Horror Writers, for a couple years, and there was a meeting where literally 30 horror writers stood around trying to figure out what the definition of horror was, and no one could quite crack it. No, the group isn't there anymore. I think they killed the group ultimately, and it became a kind of fixation on me. Like, how can I be so invested in this thing that I can't even define? Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I was always trying to define it incorrectly, because I was always looking at the type of things that were in the horror genre. And that's not what it's about. It's about how those things affect the person viewing it, reading it, consuming it. And I think that is the key. I think that's as close as I think I can get. As I know that other people have different definitions, and I respect all of them, but I think mine works.
I like it. I think it does too.
Can I ask a favor of you?
Okay.
Can you show off that statue that your head is currently blocking from the camera?
Yeah. That's pretty cool, huh?
It is very cool. It's very cool.
You want a close-up?
Sure. So this is, for those of you who don't know, this is the Stoker Award.
It's got all kinds of little... Oh, sorry. My door fell off of mine, so it goes flying. But yeah, there's like little critters crawling out of the windows and gargoyles, and it is a really pretty statue, and it's extremely heavy.
Well, that's good. That's good, because if it was a thin resin thing, everyone who has ever won one would be broke by this point. So, Sarah, what's the future look like? When can we expect more?
Well, the novel I've just finished writing, another unabashedly gothic one. This one with lots of ghosts in it, Lauren. That I'm planning to shop that to agents. Bone Weaver almost got an agent. We did a revise and resubmit, and then it was kind of, why don't you set this aside and send me your next one, sort of thing. And I didn't feel like sitting on it, so I went ahead and submitted it myself. But because of Bone Weaver's success, there have been things coming up for Bone Weaver that I need an agent for. Like, I've already done some foreign sales negotiations myself. I've talked to a number of film producers at some point, and it's like, I am not equipped for this. And I feel like I need an agent, and I have a manuscript ready to start sending. So that's my plan at this point, but that can take a really long time. So while I have another book ready to go, I don't know how long it'll be before it sees the light of day. But I do have a bunch of short story anthology invites right now that I'm writing for. One of my newer stories is coming out in Ellen Datlow's Best Horror of the Year in September. I've got a poem coming out in the HWA Poetry Showcase, which is like my dark secret, is that I also write poetry, because I usually don't let anyone see it, but I submitted that one. So yeah, there's a few things coming up, and hopefully the publishing world will move swiftly on the new book so that it comes out sooner rather than sits in slush piles for 6 months at a time, and it's slow.
Oh, I know. Mm-hmm. Well, where can people follow you to keep track so they can get progress reports on when we'll be seeing the next project?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as @InkwellMonster, just one word. And then my website is inkwellmonster.wordpress.com, and I am not super great about updating it. It's out of date right now, but Twitter, I'm pretty good about posting updates there. I do have a Facebook that I do update, but I have I'm not sure I love Facebook that much, but you can find my updates.
I don't face the books.
Yeah. If you're looking for me, you'll find me.
Awesome. So for this channel, we have 2 shows coming up in the coming days. On Monday, we have a often requested, often promised, and always pushed back event finally happening on the channel. So yes, after being challenged by Jonathan Lundy because of my unpopular view of James Cameron's sequel to one of my favorite films of all time, I'll finally be inviting him on the show. He'll be here Monday at 8 p.m. for us to debate the merits or lack thereof, depending on your point of view, of James Cameron's 1986 unfortunate classic, Aliens.
Sounds like it's going to be a good one.
If I have any audience left after this, it's going to be a miracle. but it's all going to be respectful. Jonathan's a great guy. He just happens to like a really bad film.
Oh, I like a lot of bad films too.
And then, of course, on the 27th, Thursday the 27th, we'll be having our next community day, where we'll be talking about remakes of films that actually live up to the potential of their original. Mm-hmm. It's the second in the series. The first was the films that we thought the remakes that we thought surpassed the original, or at least I thought so. The third one, which is still unscheduled, will be a broadcast about the ones that we think do no favors to the original. And that's going to be a long broadcast. You might want to be in footy pajamas for that one, get a pillow or two ready, and find a flight attendant to fluff a pillow or two. In the meantime, everyone have a great rest of your weekend. And I do have a review of Aaron Kuntz's The Pale Door coming out later today. I hope you'll join me for that. Other than that, have a great day.
They make movies look bad.